Hello everybody, assalamu alaikum. Okay, so we are done with our second monthly syllabus. Okay, so we'll start reviewing today again. Okay, so the first chapter of paper 2 was monetary supply. Okay, monetary policy. Okay, so that means chapter 32. Okay, so what is monetary policy? So basically, a government can influence aggregate demand by adjusting interest rates or the money supply in the economy. This approach to aggregate demand management is called monetary policy. Okay, so we say that we have this, yeah. So what happens that whenever the government wants to achieve some economic growth or unemployment or inflation, what they do by adjusting the aggregate demand, there is one way by which government can achieve them. Okay, and if and when they're trying to adjust the aggregate demand, if they try to adjust with the help of um, by adjusting interest rate or money supply, and this will be known as monetary supply. Okay, okay. So, you know what is interest rate? Interest rate is the cost of borrowing money. So, whenever interest changes, it is some things also changes like um, aggregate demand. Okay, and what we have here is that because of the change in aggregate demand, many kind of yeah, objective also can be achieved. So we'll talk about them in details later. And the next thing we can adjust is money supply. Money supply means like we have what money supply, that means availability of money in the economy. Okay. The money that is circulating into the economy. Okay. So the government can also try to increase or decrease this money supply to achieve this macroeconomic objectives. So, so let's see what will happen if we change the interest rate to the contents of the aggregate demand. So see that there are consumption, investment, and government expenditure and export and import. Yeah. So remember, these are contents of aggregate demand. So what happens that um, this contents of aggregate demand will be affected if the interest rate is changed. So see what's happening that because of the rise in aggregate demand, rise in interest rate, what will happen to consumption? Consumption will fall, yeah, because the cost of borrowing money will fall. As a result, this will be having the aggregate the economy will have less consumption because the cost of borrowing money is increasing, so people will find it expensive or difficult to borrow money. So as a result, this yeah, consumption will fall, and this fall in consumption will lead to a fall in aggregate demand as well. Next, we have investment. So investment will also fall if the interest rate increases because it's like that. Again, that the cost of borrowing money is increasing, right? And so if the cost interest rises, cost of borrowing money will increase. So investment will be expensive. So the firms will invest less. And government expenditure is not much influenced by interest rate because like the government spending must be done even if the interest rate is high, so it doesn't have much effect, but still there might be an adverse effect in government expenditure when there's a rise in interest rate. Next, we have export and import. So, if export and import is will, or I think like that, if interest rate has a strong link between the if there is a strong link between interest rate and exchange rate, there will be mm, um, if interest rate has a strong link with the exchange rate, there will be some effect. Okay, but if there is not a strong link between um, exchange rate and interest, then there won't be much effect. So let's assume that there are a strong link between interest rate and exchange rate. Then what will happen that fall in exchange rate will have a fall in exchange rate as well. Okay. See that if the exchange rate falls, the price of export will become cheaper. Then what will happen? As the foreigners will find it cheaper, then the overall export of the country will increase. Okay. So an increase in the export and the fall in import will have a positive effect on the aggregate demand. Okay, so that's the situation. What's happening, and this fall and when there will be a rise in exchange rate or rise in interest rate, and there will be an adverse effect. Okay, so there will be a situation where export will fall and import will rise. So the aggregate demand will have an adverse this loose monetary policy. What will happen that they will be using mm, uh, reduced interest rate and increased money supply. Okay. Why? Because they want to mm, achieve uh, economic growth or unemployment. Mm, Sorry, something's missing here. Mm, it's economic growth over here. Then the unemployment here, inflation over here will be situation. Okay. Then next, if we want to achieve inflation, then this is the thing we need to achieve. Okay, we need to use tight monetary policy. So when we are using tight monetary policy, there will be um, yeah, higher interest rate, which will make the borrowing difficult. So borrowing will fall. It will be more expensive, right? Then, as a result, the consumption investment, that means the consumers or the farms, everyone will reduce their investment, and as a result, the aggregate demand will fall. And as the aggregate demand is falling, the price level will also fall. Okay, so if price level fall, this is known as inflation. Okay, and there will be inflation. Okay, then there will be balance of payment. So when there is a tight monetary policy, we can also solve the balance of payment, but this one is a bit complicated. Okay, we can solve it with the help of loose monetary policy or tight monetary policy. Both can be done. Okay, so what's happening that let's see how we can solve with the help of tight monetary policy. If we use tight monetary policy, then what will happen? That again this lower borrowing will lead to lower spending, and specifically it will be lower spending on imported items, as people can borrow much, so they will be they has to they need to be settled with the local items. They cannot go for expensive imported items. So overall effect will be like that import will fall and the payment will improve. Okay. But see, there will be an effect like this in balance of payment. Like if there is a strong link between the interest rate and exchange rate, there will be if there like we discussed before, if there is a strong link between interest rate and exchange rate, there will be um, this effect that like we discussed over here. Uh, okay. So if there is a strong link between the interest rate and exchange rate, there will be an effect from the see in the monetary policy. See, yeah, the interest rate is falling. Okay, so if the interest rate falls, what will happen? There will be the exchange rate will fall as well, right? So as the exchange rate is falling, okay, what will happen? The exchange rate is falling, then what will happen? The export will rise, right? Because the export will become cheaper to the foreign people. Okay, so this lower exchange rate will increase the export. Okay, this higher export will lead to a better balance of payment situation. Okay. So this balance of payment may seem a bit complicated, but see, it's not. It's complicated than the yeah, previous ones like economic growth, unemployment, or inflation. But actually, it's a very interesting thing. See, that if it's related to the borrowing, just like the other cases, if it's related to the borrowing, then then rise in interest will lead to reduced borrowing and reduced spending on import, and import will fall and balance of payment will rise. But if there is a strong link between the exchange rate and interest rate, what will happen? That the export will rise, so balance of payment will have a better situation. Okay. And the next thing is we have a trade-off. So trade-off is like we already are observing that if we achieve one item, yeah, then what will happen? The other items will have a worse situation. So that this means that this is a there are many contradictory things will be happening. By solving one problem, another problem will be rising. So that's the problem, right? Mm, Okay, so see what's happening then. If we choose a loose monetary policy, then what will happen? Economic growth can be achieved, or unemployment can be achieved, or and sometime, sorry, unemployment can be solved, and balance of payment even can be improved sometimes. Okay, but at the same time, what will happen? The inflation may have a negative effect. Inflation may rise, and we'll be in trouble. Again, think about tight monetary policy. When we are using tight monetary policy, inflation can be solved. That means it can be reduced or controlled, and at the same time, balance of payment also can be have can be improved, right? But economic growth and unemployment, these two objectives will face problem, right? So and that's what we're talking about. That there are contradictory things. So it's easy to blame government, but it's a very difficult job for the government. When one problem is solved, the other problem arises. Or if you solve one problem, other problem may become even extreme. Okay, so that's the thing. So it's a difficult situation. Okay, so you may also receive a problem like this in the question. Say that what kind of monetary policy at, will you adopt as a finance minister of Bangladesh to recover from the COVID-19 situation? Okay, so the pandemic situation is going on. So what can you do? How can you yeah, so, solve this problem? So see what's happening there. Okay, so this pandemic situation is leading to what? The economic growth is a problem, right? The economy is heading towards recession. Then unemployment is rising. Okay, so this is one of the key problems during COVID-19 situation, right? So what will we choose? We'll definitely go for loose monetary policy, right? Okay, so when will we? So what we can do? You can start with the definition of loose monetary policy, and you can explain that what is it, what you are adjusting. We are adjusting we are reducing interest rate and increasing money supply to achieve macroeconomic objectives. In this case, okay, then we'll explain by explaining these steps and tell that yeah, these are the way by which you can achieve economic growth and reduce unemployment. Okay. Then again, you will have to mention that, however, there are negative effects as well. These two will be achieved, but inflation may rise. Okay, that's a trade-off. So you have to mention about the trade-off. Inflation may rise. Then there's something called environmental pollution. Okay, as you're producing so much, environmental pollution may rise. Then resource may get depleted or used up. So the next generation will be in trouble. Okay, so that's a problem. Okay, so yeah, then you can also suggest, yeah, there are other policies which can be more effective in this case, like fiscal policy or supply side policy. So these can be can have even a better effect. So that's a situation that can be. So this way you can or tell answer the good side as well as the bad side, and finally you'll give a conclusion. Okay. You'll say that yeah, you can if this policy have some negative effect or adverse effect on the economy, but this is effective to achieve this economic growth or unemployment in many cases. Okay. Okay. Okay then. So that's all for from this chapter. Um, so if you're having any problem, let me know. So see what's happening here. Okay, so let's talk about this topic a bit more. That like we were discussing about the interest rate and current account. Okay, we talked about the strong link between the interest rate and exchange rate. Okay, but it can be also affected by the income elasticity of import. Okay, if the imported goods are income elastic, okay, then there will be an effect, and if it's inelastic, then the effect would be different. Okay, and also price elasticity of demand. This also has an effect on on import. Okay, so it's like this that if let's say that if imports are elastic, then what will happen? That higher interest rate will reduce the demand. Okay, so this will improve the current account situation. Okay, so when this import is elastic, at that time this higher interest or tight monetary policy will be effective. But if it's not, if it's inelastic, it's not yeah, real yeah, not affected by the income change in income, then it won't be so much effective. Then we talked about the exchange rate and interest rate relationship. So if there is a strong link, then there will be a this rise in interest rate will have a rise in exchange rate, which will reduce. mm, yeah, import will become expensive and import will become cheaper. And though so current account situation will worsen. So see that at that time it won't be effective. We have to use loose monetary policy uh, to if there is a strong link between exchange rate and interest rate. And the last one is price elasticity of demand. So uh, uh, so if they are both price elastic, the exchange rate does rise when interest rate rises. So import will be cheaper and export will be dearer. Okay, so this will again worsen the situation. Okay, so we need to be careful when we are making decision. Okay. Okay, so that's all for today. Okay, let me know if you're facing any problem. Okay, that's all for today. Thank you, everybody. See you in the next lesson, inshallah.